Hey guys, it's Graham. What's crackin'? This is my review of Monster Hunter Memoirs Fever by Larry Correia and Jason Córdova. This review will be in print on Upstream Reviews in October, but this book will be out at the beginning of the month, and then the review will come out a few weeks later. I was able to read an e-arc of it, and I wanted to share my thoughts with you guys here on the channel. Larry has been publishing these books with Bain since 2009, and he famously did a tie-in trilogy with John Ringo that came about in a very unique way. And now he's starting another one with Jason Córdova, a friend of his. This is a phenomenon we've seen before where authors get really deep into an established series and then they start bringing other authors in to write for it. They slow down their release schedule. They start farming it out to collaborators. This can be a big risk for authors unless they're just not worried about the diminishing returns. It can also be a risk for the readers who they come to expect a certain type of quality from a series and they want it to conclude. Obviously it's an ongoing series, but you want it to wrap well. You want it to stay consistent all throughout. Well, Larry Correia is famously picky about who he allows to write in the Monster Hunter world. Now, John Ringo is a very successful and established sci-fi author, so there were no doubts about his skills or his ability to write well and to write seamlessly, and all Larry had to do was change a few things so that it fit within the timeline and didn't break canon for the world. There was also the Monster Hunter Files, which was an anthology of MHI short stories that he curated. And again, he was very protective of his baby because that's his main series. He also had a book with Sarah Hoyt. She wrote Monster Hunter Guardian, which happened concurrently with Monster Hunter Siege. So that's like a 7A and 7B type book. All of these authors have done a solid job of showing readers what they want to see in the world, maybe taking them to places they haven't been yet, while still respecting what the fans come to know and love about MHI. I'm pleased to say that Jason Córdova, I've heard Larry say Cordova, but in Spanish it's Córdova, so I might bugger that pronunciation up, but he shows that he's really able to live up to that standard. He introduces us to a character named Chloe Mendoza. She's an MHI employee of the kind that we haven't exactly seen before, but before we dig too much into that, let's talk about the story. In layman's terms, the nation of Israel, they have their own version of the CIA. It's called the Mossad. And within the Mossad, you have the Khaidon, which is their elite squad of assassins. And it is here, among the Khaidon in the 1970s, that we find Chloe Mendoza. She isn't Israeli, but she's also not mortal in the sense that you're thinking, so she gets to do a lot of things differently from other people. While she's on assignment with the Khaidon to protect an Egyptian politician, she and her squad get tuned up by a sand demon, and although she survives, she suddenly finds herself in need of new employment. She goes to the States and she calls up an old friend who is, Earl Harbinger. He puts her in touch with a new team of hunters in the greater Los Angeles area. It turns out that the last professional group of hunters, they weren't an MHI team, it was a different company, they also got walloped by a monster, and now the local MCB branch is looking for somebody else to handle the contract for the LA Valley. So not only does Chloe have to mesh with a new team, she also has to help with the business side of things and make a good impression on the feds. So slightly different skill set from what she was doing with the Mossad. Complications arise when the new LA team realizes that a number of their cases are connected and they all point to a dangerous rising power in the area. If that wasn't enough, Chloe also has to hide her own secret from her team, namely that she is a Mesoamerican demigod. She's roughly 100 years old, even though she only looks like she's 20. And she's having a protracted argument with her father, who expects her to take up the family cause. Spoiler alert, he's not the mortal side of her family. Chloe is puff exempt. She wants to stay that way, so she needs to be a good girl, but she's got different forces kind of pulling on her and working on her. But in order to take down the looming threat in the 1970s in LA, she just might need to let her inner monster out. I really liked the story here. It reminded me of why I like urban fantasy in general and MHI in particular. I feel like lately, like this year, I've tried to drag myself through too many high fantasy novels. And you've got to learn all the lingo, and you've got to learn the world and the customs and a whole bunch of other stuff. But then this book comes along and it gives you plenty of the familiar, but then it introduces you to new revelations in the whole MHI timeline. And it doesn't take an extra 100 pages to figure all that stuff out. Córdova sets the table and then invites you to eat because you're hungry now. I was satisfied with the opening course, but as soon as it wrapped up, I was ready for the next one. As to the characters, we've seen MHI books from the perspective of monsters before. MH Alpha was Earl, MH Nemesis was Frank's. Chloe, though, is a different type of non-human. She's tied to a mythology that can add surprises to the storyline without subverting anything that's already happened. She is what's called a Nigualii, and you'll get a better sense of what that means throughout the story. I do want you guys to read this book. As for her team, it would have been easy for Córdova to just write his own version of Owen's team from the main series, where you'd have, the tech guy and the tough hot chick and the former jock and all that. Like Larry Correia has said that his core cast is a spoof of the stereotypical horror movie cast. They're just competent with firearms. They're able to kill monsters. But Jason Córdova instead, puts together his own cast. So you've got a leader who has experience and skills with leading. He just doesn't have the ambition to lead. And he gets injured, so he's kind of sidelined, and then Chloe has to take up the slack. You've also got a hot chick who's not especially violent or tough, like Holly Newcastle, but she's competent in a fight, and she helps the team to navigate the world of discos and clubs where the monsters are operating. They have different skills and contributions to make. There are others, but you get the idea. So in the spirit of familiar but different, Córdova delivers a fresh set of people to root for who aren't just vague reskins of the ones that we already know. Like I've said, the story is set in Los Angeles in the 1970s. There's disco at every turn, and that's why it's called Fever. Everything else is what you'd expect from an MHI novel. You've got the government oversight into monster hunting. You've got evil creatures lurking in the dark. It's all there. But Córdova doesn't just drag things along as he shows you Chloe's backstory or her relationship with her father. Like, the pacing is quick. It gives you what you need without making you stand around to get it. Other things that we look for when we do upstream reviews, we mentioned whether or not there's politics. There's none. Content warning, it's like every other MHI novel. You've got combat violence, you've got profanity up to the F-bomb. It's not excessive, but it's not downplayed. It's just kind of a realistic portrayal of, we'll say, the merc lifestyle. So who's it for? Fantasy readers who also like thrillers, or anyone who remembers the disco era or is familiar with Los Angeles. Anyway, why should you buy it? If we're talking about being 15 books deep into the MHI series, why buy this one? What does it add? Well, a lot of established IPs, like I said, they bring in collaborators after several years, and those books can divide or diminish the fan base. But Correia is famously picky about who he lets write in the MHI universe because he wants to protect the world and the canon, and that is something that I want more of. And Jason Córdova comes in and he writes a great book. It would be really great on its own, but it has a little bit more oomph behind it because it's part of this larger, sprawling timeline and universe that so many people have come to know and love. So Monster Hunter Memoirs Fever, it's a swift-moving yet fresh breath of air. It honors what has come before it while showing us something new to love. I am excited that there are 2 more of these to go. I'm ready to see what comes next, but you guys are all going to find out in a couple of weeks when this book launches. So that's it for now. Check the description for relevant links, and for more reviews, go to upstreamreviews.com. The collaborators over there, man, they are doing the Lord's work, let me tell you that. Anyway, drive safe. See you out there.